It's a real sad day for gamers. And for me personally, it just burns bad. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it's mostly Nintendo's fault. And I think that's the worst part about all of this. So, goodish morning, Mario, and goodish morning, Switch fans. It's not your fault. It's Nintendo's fault. And I'm sure you've seen the news. It's such a bummer. I feel like, even more than most, I just loved E3 with such a crazy pasta passion. Like, I was noodle arms every time this thing came on. Before, when I watched it on TV, every time I attended in person, even after when it was like canceled for COVID, I just hoped it came back, awaited its return. And even though the writing's been all over the walls, it's now officially over. And I think it really sucks. I think it's going to leave a big hole. I think we didn't know what we had while we did. And I think there's certain parties responsible. And it's upsetting because I love these parties. Not the parties of E3. I love the parties responsible for its demise. So what's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. Let me know your take, please, in the comments down below. I think it's fine to have some emotions about this. E3 for me was Christmas for gaming. It was Christmas in June, and I honestly look forward to it just as much or more than the actual holiday itself. Waking up and watching these shows, reading the articles, watching the trailers, listening to the podcast was a highlight of my life for many moons. And today, the ESA posted, after more than 2 decades of serving as a central showcase for the video games industry, ESA has decided to end E3. Nail in the coffin. Like I said, the writing was on the walls. They haven't had the event for years. They tried to hand it off to new organizers. It didn't work out. And there were some that really orchestrated this and made it happen and wanted it to happen. And we're sick of E3, but I really feel like the gaming industry and gamers are way worse because of it. In exchange for 1 week of everybody coming together and building the biggest gaming castle they could possibly build, we now have like 150 different streams that usually end up being disappointing because they're so diluted and spread out, you can't really make a great show anymore. But to the title and the point, this all goes back to Nintendo. Nintendo, the people who celebrate gaming, Nintendo, the people who are about fun in gaming, Nintendo who makes some of the most fun games and have extreme success with the Switch, Mario, Zelda, and are dominating the gamer mindshare by being very fan-centric with their titles and trying their best to produce a system that appeals to all lifestyles and all players. But they sure did it to E3. Does anybody remember Ravi Drums? Anybody remember Miyamoto struggling with his Wiimote connection demoing Legend of Zelda? Anybody remember Reggie holding up a DS? I remember all these moments because Nintendo used to be the highlight of E3 until they weren't. And they did it in a sneaky way because starting in 2013, they were no longer housing a big press conference at E3. They decided to do their own presentation, a Direct. Nintendo Direct, one of the coolest things we have now, but at what cost? Nintendo pioneered the idea that now has absolutely usurped E3, which is everyone does a digital showcase. They have their own time to shine. They bring focus to their own games. They cater to their own audience, and they don't have to pay big bucks to the Los Angeles Convention Center and the ESA to have a booth. But what we lose is the celebration. What we lose is the spectacle. What we lose is the Christmas in June week, and instead we are left with Summer Games Fest and Winter Games Fest, aka the Game Awards, and Jeff Keighley decides everything that we see about video games as a community. Obviously, individually, Sony does State of Play, Xbox does their thing, Nintendo do their Directs, but what was cool about E3? Everybody came together. I posted this on Twitter earlier, like, together is better. And it sucks that the gaming mega giants decided to ignore this. They want to do it alone. They want to do it by themselves. And maybe that makes more business sense. Maybe that makes more eyeball sense. But I don't think it makes better sense for gaming. I think gaming is spreading. I think gaming is expanding. But I think gaming is diluting. And I wonder what effect that has in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Nothing will be like E3 again. There's no incentive. There's no reason. There's no motivation. Jeff Keighley will try to do his thing, and I don't know if anyone will ever stop him or try to one-up him. He's got such a stranglehold on this space, and frankly, As much as I respect and appreciate the guy trying, his shows do not compare. They pale in comparison to the E3s that I went to. But Nintendo left in 2013. And they were still part of it, right? They still had a presence on the show floor. They still had an upstairs booth for press. They still were there. They brought the puppets, the Star Fox puppets. They were there at E3. They brought the Wii U. They had a big show floor presence, but they weren't actually really on board. And then in 2018, Sony said, our visions don't align with the ESA. We're pulling out as well. And then Microsoft moved over to a separate theater, and before you know it, the three major players that built E3 no longer support E3. How would we possibly expect it to go on? How would we possibly expect it to continue? But the impetus for this, the beginning point, there's no chicken or egg. There's just straight up Nintendo leaving in 2013. There's Nintendo thinking they could do it better by themselves, and in some ways, they could. But it's like a lot of things in the world. Individuality and selfishness and personal desire trumps community and togetherness. And maybe that sounds really airy-fairy and like honey and rainbows, but I think that there is just a sad truth that when it was all together, when everybody was sort of in this one space, it was magical. And you'll see all the memories people are posting on social media of like this one time at E3, this one time at E3. And they all are positive. They're all amazing memories. They're all so fun. And they're things that can't happen when you're sitting in your bathroom watching the Twitch stream of the individual event. I know there's some convenience there. I know it makes it easier for some people. I know that there's benefits in some ways, but it's just not the same. It's disconnected, it's diluted, and frankly, it makes me really upset. I will miss E3 with a passion. And there's plenty of people that poo-pooed E3 for years and said it wasn't worth it, too much work, too much spectacle, and now we're left with no spectacle. It bums me out that my kids will not grow up getting to watch a Christmas in June E3 spectacular, and instead will have 50 different events they have to pay attention to. Now, Nintendo fans kind of win the most, ironically, because even though they left E3 and are responsible for the eventual downfall where everyone kind of realized we don't need E3, we can do it on our own, Nintendo has their own show, and they do amazingly well. Sony can have their own show, EA can have their own show, Warner Brothers can have their own show, Ubisoft can have their own show. We all can be doing it ourselves. But Nintendo does it the best. Nobody does it better. The directs are not always amazing, but they have so much hype. There's so much just passion around all of those showcases, and so they have retained some of the spirit of E3. But it fades as time goes on, right? Like, directs get more and more diluted. Directs get more and more disappointing, I feel, as they just don't possibly live up to the expectation where it originated. Because where it originated was Sony getting on stage for 2 hours, and Microsoft getting on stage for 2 hours, and Nintendo, and they'd respond to each other, and they'd rush a trailer forward they were planning to hold back, and they'd change their price as one revealed, and it was this big competitive brouhaha of gaming goodness. They all worked against each other, but together in the same space. And I think that's the big takeaway for me is like, yeah, like the convention itself is fun. Being in a physical place is fun, and it's something that we've had to really wrestle with since COVID. Like, how do we adjust? And there's some great things, like I said, work from home is really beneficial for many people. And events have been able to, the exposure is huge, right? You can connect to people across the world, people who wouldn't be able to come, people who wouldn't be able to go. But even if I could never go to E3 again, I'd love the show to exist. It's just special and cool to know there's a Disney World of games every summer in Los Angeles at a convention center where everybody is working together to promote this medium. And now we have Summer Games Fest, and we have Directs, we have State of Plays, and we have Game Awards, and they all seem to just not feel exactly right. There's a reason that they often get C's, D's on the report cards people post on Twitter, that there's confusion and frustration of, is it an award show? Is it a Winter Games Fest? Just show the trailers. Should State of Play even existed? Did they need to have a State of Play because we could have just saved everything for a showcase? What's the difference between a State of Play and a showcase? Is the Direct happening? Like, all of this comes from Nintendo leaving E3 and slowly but surely proving to everybody else that they didn't need it. But maybe they did. Maybe financially they didn't need it. Maybe metrics and PR-wise they didn't need it. But I feel like for the heart of gaming, they did need it. There is an aspect to everything, a spirit to everything, that I feel is lost in our diluted, disconnected world. And again, I'm not trying to be super airy-fairy, super like pie in the sky here, super ethereal. I'm just saying that I think by having it all, we lose a big part of it. And I don't know how to really articulate that in a very logical way, except that it's a feeling in a sense that if we miss out on everybody being together and everybody kind of putting forth their best effort to have this amazing celebration, we end up with a lot of corny, cringy, awkward streams, and we honestly end up with a lot of games that feel cookie cutter. Now, the nature of what genres are popular and the nature of what games are popular is not a direct relation of E3 dying and falling apart and crumbling and not existing, but as an industry, there are patterns at play here. There is a distinct movement towards games as services, online, DLC, long-term games, and a distinct move away from linear, single-player, creative video games. Alan Wake was absolutely praised by the press and didn't even chart in the top 150 on PlayStation or Xbox for playtime, which shows such a disparaging gap between what reviews say is good and what players are actually playing. And that's a whole different discussion, but I do think that in some weird way it does connect. I feel like there's a disconnect, and I feel like part of the disconnect somehow does involve everybody wanting to do their own thing, have their own thing, and operate very independently and operate in their own space. And we have tons of studio closures, we have tons of layoffs, we have tons of failures, we have so many issues and so many problems. And obviously E3 doesn't solve or save that. But I think mentality-wise, and I think just focus-wise, the gaming industry is in a weird place. And for me, the loss of E3 just further cements like we are not fixing it right now. We are not solving it right now. There's a lot of issues, and there's great stuff too. This year has been phenomenal for games. There's been a lot of really amazing, exciting games, but there's also been like a ton of heartbreak for studios, and like I said, failures, layoffs, etc. E3 to me is the latest, and E3 is sort of the end of an era. I don't know how it goes forward. I don't think there's going to be a show that tries to replace it. I don't think there's going to be anything that really comes close. I think you're just going to see now that eventually, PAX will shut down, and In-Person Summer Games Fest will shut down, and maybe Gamescom will shut down, and you'll be left with just a bunch of digital presentations that stream these trailers directly to their fan base and maybe work for some and don't work for others. It seems like the bigger get bigger, and a lot of the mid-tier stuff just can't make it. And I just don't really love the direction it's heading. And I'm kind of really frustrated that Nintendo began this slippery slope. Like, I love the directs, and I think we are lucky that we get great directs, and they're still fun. I still look forward to them so much. It's still like, it's the best, closest thing to E3 that we can get excited about, and so I'm grateful for that. But when I stopped and thought about it today, I was like, oh my God, the directs that I love in place of E3 are kind of the reason that I have to love something in place of E3, because they are the ones that began in 2013 by leaving the main presentation orchestration of the show. And then Sony followed and Xbox followed them, and now E3 is dead. That's it. That's all, folks. Porky Pig says goodbye. E3 is no more, and I don't think there'll be anything ever like it again. There's nothing I can do about it. It does make me sad, and I just wish, like, at some level it feels like it's just so about money and so about metrics and not really about maybe stuff that it should be more about. And I feel like, there's tons of indies and different studios that really are trying to elevate and lift things in a way that boosts sort of the good vibes that gaming really had for a long time. And maybe it's just kind of being lost in some ways. There's still plenty of great games. There's still plenty of great titles. Like I said, Nintendo's ultra successful. The directs are really fun, but this loss of E3 feels like a long time coming, and now a cementing of an approach from all of these big publishers and all of these games that I'm not the biggest fan of. Let me know what you're taking in the comments down below. Thanks a lot, Nintendo. I love you so much, but you're responsible, really, for E3 falling apart. And you could blame E3, I guess, and the ESA for not adjusting, but honestly, I think adjusting was one of the things they did most wrong. I think trying to fabricate and formulate this new E3 that would more appeal to all the, like, they tried to evolve, and I think what they were trying to evolve into just wasn't, like, it's not great. Like, what they needed to do was stay the course, in my opinion. That probably would have failed as well. It probably would not have worked either. People are very fickle, and people seem to want different things or not even know what they want. And yeah, I'm just bummed about the show. I'm just sad about games right now. And there's a lot of good stuff to play. So, you know, I'll go get my Marvel Snap rounds in and finish up Spider-Man 2. And yeah, plenty of great stuff. But this sucks. Thanks, Nintendo. And thanks, everybody, for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Love you lots. SwitchForce. Out.